Well, hello there. How's it going? I wanted to talk a bit about being barefoot. It's been a huge life-changing experience for me, and one way I could say I've been barefoot more seriously for about a year, but I feel like I've been barefoot pretty much my whole life. Well, obviously we're born barefoot, and that's the first thing to kind of mention is that for anyone that thinks barefoot is like the weird thing that hippie people do, maybe that's true, but it's our natural form. And it's kind of like food. You look at like organic food. We say like this is organic, this is inorganic, but really like organic food is just food. And the fact that we have to call it organic is kind of this odd thing. And it's similar with like being barefoot. It's become this thing like, whoa, I go hike up these trails. Let's see if you can see them. I go hike up these mountains and people are like, whoa, you're barefoot. And I'm like, whoa, you're wearing shoes. Because it shifts, my mindset at least. Because the more I realize how obvious being barefoot is, the weirder it is for me to see somebody wearing a shoe. When I see somebody wearing a shoe, now I'm like, do you know? Like, are you aware of being barefoot? Typically people are not. So I figured this would be a great video just to chat about how to go barefoot, why barefoot has changed my life. I don't know, like, I've probably gotten 15 people in the last week to start trying out barefoot. I went with a hike for some friends today, and they were like, oh, you're barefoot. Within 10 minutes, they took their shoes off, and we hiked for like 2.5 hours, which I don't necessarily recommend. You have to trust yourself, but they did an amazing job, and they were like, this is incredible. And usually we slip, and we have this joke about how often we slip, and we didn't slip once. So first off, if you don't know much about the foot, I'm obsessed with feet, and my dad and sister are actually podiatrists, and so I guess the foot world's been in my face for a long time. The feet have been in my face for a long time, but I didn't know much about feet. And then last year I moved to Colorado, and just something inside, I moved back to Colorado, and something inside of me said, take your shoes off. I was living out here by the mountains outside of Boulder, and it was like, just take your shoes off, a little whispering in the ear. And something inside of me just was like, yeah. And I took my shoes off, started hiking, and now I've gotten into barefoot running. Actually, in 2 weeks from today, I'll be running my first marathon barefoot in the mountains, and it's a race that no one's ever attempted barefoot, and I'm just excited about it. And I've become obsessed with feet, and I've also been into reflexology. But what I've found is there's a lot of confusion in the barefoot world because, you have people that run barefoot on streets, you have people that hike barefoot on trails, you have people that are into reflexology and understanding the foot, but there isn't a lot that's like tying it together. So I've had to be my own advocate. I've learned from a lot of amazing resources. Born to Run definitely was the first step. There's places like correcttoes.com, a great spot. Chris McClanahan out in Portland. He's all about foot function and helping people rather than feel like they just need to get more and more padded shoes and orthotics, actually how to understand how their foot works and to take the power back into their feet. Because what happens, a shoe is almost like, it's like a cast or like a foot prison, and it kind of contains your foot. And there's a huge range of shoes, I should say. But the standard shoe, the really padded shoes where you have, the toes are lifted, the heel's lifted, the ball of the foot's kind of on the bottom, you have an arch support often and orthotics, and it kind of just like keeps this amazing thing that is your foot just completely disconnected from the world. And so if you think about it, think about your hand. So actually on your hand and on your foot, there's a special type of skin that just has a lot more sensation to it. So what happens is, imagine this is my foot, right? Now, if you think about how often you use your hands, imagine if you had to put some sort of all day. If I cook, I play guitar, I love using my hands, I garden. Imagine if I had to wear a sock on my hand all day, or a mitten or something. It just would take away all the amazing functioning of the hand. And so the more I got into this barefoot lifestyle, I started seeing, well, my foot's the same way. I have just as much functioning with my foot as I do my hand. It grips, it senses the earth. It's literally our grounding into the earth. So what happens is when you start going barefoot, you start feeling all these sensations because your feet have more nerve endings than any other place in your body by, I think, a pretty significant amount. So what happens is your feet are communicating with the ground. And when we put on a synthetic rubber sole, we are completely cut off, literally completely cut off from the true nature of our foot. And it wants to do so much. And we're so disconnected from the earth. And this is what's touching the earth and communicating with the earth, and in turn grounding ourselves, which releases energy. A lot of spiritual people talk about grounded. I'm trying to stay grounded. I really want to be grounded and centering myself. But if you're not putting your feet in the ground, you're missing the whole point. And you're probably going to end up struggling and much more than you realize, especially if you're in a sterile environment. Now, I'm not saying that being barefoot is for everyone. and that is a huge part. I'm very passionate about it, and I'll talk to anybody. I'm a barefoot shoe salesman, and it's not for everybody, but I find that anyone that I go on a hike with ends up taking their shoes off because they're like, wait a minute, that looks amazing. I was running with someone recently, they were like, just the way you were running just like looks so natural and free and comfortable, and I just took my shoes off. It's not for everybody. If you live in the city and there's broken glass and needles and stuff, I've been in cities barefoot, but I'm not going to say like you're going to be inspired to be in the city and take your shoes off. Maybe you will. I know people that do it, but I find the more I get in tune with nature, the more I just want to be barefoot. And now I don't wear shoes. I have a really thin sandal that I wear if I'm really like forced to wear a shoe. Being back, I was in Central America. It was super easy to be barefoot. Being back in Colorado, grocery stores aren't letting me in. Which is unfortunate, but I get it. So I have this really thin sandal if I need it. But what I will say about being barefoot and transitioning to a barefoot lifestyle is start small, right? Start on grass, start on dirt. Find just like, even just standing in your house and just start stretching your feet. Become aware of your feet. I've been studying reflexology, and I'm just like, I'll just literally sit all day with my feet, and I'm just touching them and feeling them and like massaging them, just getting to know them. And then what happens, and I'm not sure how well you can see my feet, but see, my feet are super spread out. You see that? So typically shoes squeeze our feet in, right? So to get our feet back to a more natural form, it takes a long time. It takes a lot of practice and conditioning, and you really need to be smart about it and know yourself. If you're starting to feel pain, you're like, oh, I've gone on barefoot hikes with people that haven't done it much, and you'll be sore. I even still get sore. Like, I'm sore right now. I have like a little tiny ankle sprain because I did an insane run up a mountain yesterday, and I ended up running. I had this runner behind me, just wearing a shod runner. Shod, that's a funny word. Running behind me, and I was like, I want to see if I can just keep up with him and stay ahead of him. And for 2.5 miles, I sprinted full speed down this mountain, and I did it, but I was like, well, that was intense. So I've just been kind of like just taking care of my ankle. I still get injuries, I still step on stuff, I still cut myself, but I'm so much more aware. So when you go barefoot, you're forced to go slower, and that's another thing. When you think about being mindful, you're gonna walk slower, you're gonna hike slower, you're gonna run slower. I don't run for speed. I'm not doing this marathon because I'm trying to like win or break some kind of records. Granted, no one's ever run it barefoot, so I'll at least break the barefoot record and set it at the same time, which is kind of funny. But I don't care about those things, because to me it's not about like this racing lifestyle. Like, I love running barefoot because to me it's more like dancing. I grew up my whole life dreading and hating running. Whenever I played sports, it was long distance running. I absolutely hated. However, now when I'm in the mountains, I'm like flying, and I have tons of videos on my social medias, on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, just about how I run. It's much more of a dance. So when you're dancing through these mountains, it's like this free flowing thing. It becomes really fun, but you always have to be careful. And I think the barefoot movement gets a lot of crap because people transition either from shoes to barefoot or from shoes to barefoot running shoes, which are very like minimal shoes that kind of help your foot be much more like a foot, but also offer some protection. And there's some great companies out there you can check out, like Vivo and Luna. Those are great sandals. Earth Runners. I have some Zero and Vibrams. Those are probably like the top, I'd say 5, but there's plenty out there. But what happens is people transition too fast, and then all this stuff comes out where it's like, oh, barefoot running's a fad and it's dangerous. And yes, like when you're living your life in this foot prison and you don't actually know how to use your foot, and then you take it out and you try to, it's like a very gentle flower, and you need to nurture that flower, and over time your foot will get strong. I look at my feet now and I'm like, they're like super powerful and strong, but they're also really flexible. And I look at the bottom of my feet, and people think they're gonna be like super gnarly, and they get like little cut up and stuff, but I have some calluses, but for the most part they're like really soft. It's almost like a gel pad or something where they've learned they can like basically form to any surface. So when I'm running, if I step on a rock, instantly, because there's so many nerve endings, it tells me, hey, don't step on that too hard, and I brace myself, or it molds to the rock. So the deeper you tune into your feet, the more amazing you will see how your feet are. And now when I look at shod runners and people walking, I'm like, that's strange, because you think about, it's like, as someone you buy a $150 hiking boot, a really nice boot, it's comfortable, it's rugged, and you can hike, and it's gonna get weaker and weaker over time. The tread's gonna wear off. Whereas your shoe, whereas your foot over time gets stronger and stronger. So it does take time, and it's like trial by fire. It's gonna be painful, and it's gonna be a whole process. But if you start to feel the process, just start small and be smart and be safe, And you might find that you're like, wait, I can't believe I wore shoes all that time. Yeah, I hope this video helps. I've got plenty more, and talk soon.